Okay, so what happened in Yufutsu? Well, Yufutsu is a small gas condensate reservoir in Japan, a very tight reservoir connected only by microfractures. So diffusion is important. Okay, it was to be a very ordinary critical transition if it was not for the thermal gradient of the field. This is very important because this critical transition would show a very narrow density profile along depth. The compositions of the phases along depth should be very similar, and so should be their densities. The problem is that when you put the geothermal gradient, right, the paraffinic compounds, and Yufutsu is a paraffinic gas condensate, its API degree is about 41, 42. It's very paraffinic, very light condensate. And the problem is that when you apply a thermal gradient in a paraffinic gas condensate, the heavy paraffins tend to go to the cold side, and the light ends tend to go to the hot side. They tend to switch places. Well, you know that compositions are very similar, densities are very similar, so the gravity effect could be neglected. And this is the problem. When you apply the thermal gradient and the heavy paraffins tend to go to the cold top and the light ends tend to go to the hot bottom, the liquid and the gas will switch places. Because gravity is not important anymore, only thermal diffusion. But the density profile, it continues to be narrow. The compositions continue to be very similar. This is the case of Yufutsu. Let me explain with some figures for you guys to see better. The problem is that in Yufutsu, the density profile is not as huge as that one you're seeing right now. And this is because composition of the phases are very similar, right? The density profile is not as intense, but it's narrow just like that. Because of thermal gradient, if you apply thermal gradient into this system, right? If it's not isothermal anymore, the heavy paraffins tend to go to the cold top, and the light ends tend to go to the hot bottom. Then, because of thermal gradient, you see this inverted density profile. In other words, if the phases were to be just like that in an isothermal system, once you apply the thermal gradient, okay, then they tend to invert and get just like that. And then you have the one and only reservoir in the world, which shows the liquid floating over the gas. Okay, this is Yufutsu, one of the most fascinating gas condensate reservoirs in the world. Well, one question remains. Why did the operational GOR just decrease with time in Yufutsu? Well, it's very simple. Actually, the heavy components are falling from the top to the production wells. That's why. As simple as that. You want to know more about Yufutsu? It's everything here in Chapter 5. Get the book. Take a read. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.